Promotion rules for Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. This week's question of the week comes from a fellow black belt out of Florida, Tim. He sent me a message. He's like, Saad, would you mind describing who can promote who in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and the timeline and just sort of explaining the belt system? So I'm going to try to tackle that this week. And it is a more complicated task than it might seem. And the reason I say that is because there's variations. You have the International Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Federation and their rules, and that's what I'm going to explain. And then each Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu association, whether it's Gracie Barra, Gracie Humada, Alliance, Atos, they're going to have, their rules of their association. So there will be definitely a difference. I go by the IBJJF rules and their guidelines because both me and my students like to compete IBJJF tournaments. So I make sure I meet their guidelines and standards, and it's also in accordance with my association's standards. So my teacher, Luis, also follows their standards. So there's a minimum time in each rank, and for white belt there's no minimum time. For blue belt, 2 years. So once you get promoted for blue belt, the IBJJF wants you to wait 2 years before you're eligible to promote to purple. Now that's not the standard across all jiu-jitsu associations, and it's also not required, I've been a blue belt for 2 years, hey, where's my purple? It's just a minimum standard that the IBJJF set. So please understand that. Purple belt, 1.5 years, 18 months. Brown belt, 1 year. And sometimes there's a conflict between the Jiu-Jitsu association that a person might be a part of and the IBJJF and the way they look at it. Like I know here in town, maybe about 7 years ago, 2 no degree black belts promoted a brown belt to black belt. And it's like, well, they're going to have a problem in the IBJJF, but for their association, for their school, they did what they did. And, I'm not here to judge the situation. So sometimes there will be a conflict. Just know that if you don't go by the IBJJF's guidelines, they're not going to recognize your promotion. That may be a big deal to you, it may not be a big deal to you. But if your students who you promote, like if they didn't recognize my promotion and then I go to promote somebody, they're also not recognizing those people that I promote. So it can be a very complicated thing. So I do follow the IBJJF guidelines. So there's a minimum requirement. So 1.5 years, so 2 years blue, 1.5 years purple, 1 year brown. But that's just the minimum that the IBJJF puts on it. And then there's also, like one association, a good friend of mine, Mike Martinez, is in. Like their association policy was that when you win the Worlds, they promote you on the podium. Well, he won the Worlds. He'd only been a purple for a short period of time. And then he won the Master Worlds. His instructor promoted him to brown belt on the podium. But the IBJJF was like, well, you haven't been a purple belt for 1.5 years. So they made him wait at least 6 to 8 months before he could compete as a brown belt in an IBJJF tournament. And I'm not here to say whether that's right, that's wrong. It is what it is. You can agree, disagree. When it comes to who can promote who, the standard rule is you need to be 2 belts higher than the person that you're promoting. Once again, different associations, like the association where the 2 no degree black belts promoted a brown belt to black. It's like, if that's cool with them, that's what they do. But the general guidelines for the IBJJF is, so you need to be 2 belts higher than whatever you're promoting to. So for somebody to promote you to blue belt, that person would need to be a brown belt. For somebody to promote that blue belt to purple belt, that person would need to be a black belt. for somebody to promote that purple belt to brown belt, that person would need to be at least a first degree black belt. And for somebody to promote a brown belt to black belt, that person would have to be at least a second degree black belt. And that's with the IBJJF. There's different jiu-jitsu association. Probably most commonly is you have to be a third degree black belt to promote a brown belt to black belt. So the IBJJF has their minimum standards, which is what I'm addressing here. But the different Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu associations may have standards that are stricter than the IBJJF's or more lenient. But just know, if you're entering IBJJF tournaments, you're going to have to comply with the IBJJF standards. And it's an argument for another day in another video as to who the IBJJF is to tell you and your school how to do whatever. I'm not here to argue that. I'm just here to say, hey, this is what the guidelines are. Your association's guidelines may be different, but the general guideline for the IBJJF is that which I've described, and that you need to be 2 belts higher than whatever you're promoting to. I think there is I haven't looked at their instruction lately, but there is a clause, like, if you're in a place where there's not a belt there, that, like, there can be some kind of a lower belt can promote you to that point, but I don't even remember how they go about it. And it is what it is. So, like I said, and here in America, people do whatever they want. There was this one guy in Illinois. He decided he was a purple belt, and he got on video and he said, I'm going to self-promote myself to brown belt because his instructor wherever didn't agree with him or whatever, and he decided that at my school, everybody can self-promote. Whenever they think they're ready for the next belt, they can just put that belt on, and I support them. I'm saying, well, this is America. You can do whatever you want, apparently. So, but if you think you're going to compete in IBJJF standards, you can't be doing no garbage like that. So that's the answer to this week's question of the week. Got any comments, insights, feel free to list them below. Otherwise, I'll talk to y'all soon. Ciao.